While constructing my review for Conflict Desert Storm, it got me thinking. We have a huge choice of video games set during famous wars that have occurred. We have games set during World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the American Revolution, so many others. But the first Gulf War has barely been covered in a video game format, and I figured Conflict Desert Storm would have been one of the first mainstream games to actually tackle it. Most games set during this time period were released on PC, and they were few and far between, and I'd imagine that they weren't really that good compared to so many others in their respective genres, otherwise we would have heard so much more about them. But then it hit me. There was a game that was not only heavily based around the time of the Gulf War, but was released almost exactly 1 year since it officially ended, and had the audacity to set the story after the war and create events that would lead up to its version of World War III. So many games have done this since, especially Battlefield, Command & Conquer and Call of Duty, but those games mainly tackled conflicts that happened between the early 1900s up until as far as the Cold War or Vietnam. Those wars were done. The Gulf War was fresh on everyone's mind when this game came out. I'm talking, of course, about Desert Strike. Released in February of 1992 for a variety of systems including the Super Nintendo, the Amiga and the Sega Mega Drive. Desert Strike Return to the Gulf is a style of shooter that puts you in control of an Apache helicopter, with your mission being to destroy enemy infantry, vehicles, buildings, rescuing friendly soldiers while keeping your helicopter at full health. It was developed by Electronic Arts, who by this point were actually pumping out great game after great game year after year after year, especially on the Mega Drive, with games such as Road Rash, Madden 93, Road Rash 2, FIFA International Soccer, and went on to publish a ton of games throughout 1993, including the sequel to Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, as well as one of the best hockey games to ever grace a 16-bit system, NHL 94. And I could go on for ages, but Electronic Arts had the best time during this era of video games, and it definitely shows. Their games might still be fairly solid nowadays, but their business practices and mechanical decisions in their games leave a lot to be desired. But I'm not going to sit here and have a rant about EA, so let's just get on with the review. Desert Strike, as I already stated, is set during the aftermath of the Gulf War and follows a guy called General Kilbab, I cannot pronounce his name, but whatever. It follows General Kilbab, also known as the Madman, who takes over an unarmed Arab state and plans to launch a nuclear weapon. The United States government sends in an Apache team from the US Special Forces to put a stop to his plans. Jesus, this game isn't pulling any punches with its touchy violence. That's really uncomfortable to watch. But as plots go, it's very basic and very cut and paste, cookie cutter. We've seen all of it before, but that's the plot of the game. But what makes it hit home more is the fact that it's set during a time that actually happened, or just after it, but I digress. Let's move on to the gameplay. Before you start the game, you are given the option to choose a co-pilot to accompany you. As a child, I didn't really understand what purpose they would have served me, as you never see them during the game, and I figured since you would be in control of a helicopter, they would be nothing more than a cosmetic thing. But it turns out that they do actually have a use. Apparently, depending on who you choose, their efficiency with certain weapons you fire or equipment you use is increased. As I said, you are put in control of an Apache helicopter, and upon first playing the game, you'll realise almost immediately that this is not your typical shoot 'em up game. Desert Strike is presented in an isometric camera, and by default you control the helicopter by pushing up on the D-pad to go forward, regardless of what direction you're facing, and you can change direction using left or right, and down to reverse. To strip it down to the bare minimum of descriptions, it uses a tank control scheme similar to Resident Evil and the original Grand Theft Auto. You have 3 main weapons to choose from, which are mapped by each of the 3 face buttons. The A button fires what are known as Hellfire missiles, the B button fires less powerful Hydra rockets, and the C button fires a machine gun. And it doesn't stop there. Each mission will give you numerous objectives to do, and you can do them in any order you please, but you are encouraged to do them in the order you're given. But again, it's entirely up to you. These objectives vary from destroying a certain number of turrets, destroying an airfield, or killing a single unit. As well as the main objectives, there are also other side objectives for you to complete as well, such as rescuing MIAs and locating secret characters to pick up. And you would think, since there are only 5 levels in the game, that the game would be particularly short. This isn't the case, as Desert Strike has many mechanics and features that lengthen the game's playability without making it feel repetitive or padded out. It doesn't let you have it easy nor straightforward as any other shooter. Your helicopter is powered by its fuel gauge, and it does decrease during play. If it gets low, you are given instructions to fly to the nearest fuel depot to refill. Likewise, if you are low on ammo, you can pick up various ammo crates throughout the level. There are many different enemies you will encounter as well, such as tanks, ground troops, water towers and anti-air rockets, among many more. I mentioned earlier that you can rescue friendly soldiers and MIAs if you chose. As part of the non-linear style of play, you also had the option to kill friendly units, but doing so would deduct a lot of points. I'm not sure if you failed the mission if you'd done it too many times. I did not experiment, but I was basing this information from the game's manual itself and I did not see it written down, so I'm going to assume that it's a points-based system. There isn't much music in the game, but the music you do hear is provided by none other than Ron Hubbard. The same guy behind an absolute ton of EA's titles during this period, including the original Road Rash and its sequel Road Rash 2, which he worked on both immediately before and after Desert Strike, respectively. The sound effects are wonderful when you hear them. There is no background music, so you are left listening to nothing but action throughout your entire playthrough. I figured if music was added, it would ruin the game's gritty, war-torn theme. I'm happy they stuck with the ambient score of sound effects instead. During the development of Desert Strike, the developer took a lot of as-it-happened influence for the game, citing that they began development before the Gulf War even started, and was originally going to base it on the Lebanese Civil War, calling it Beirut Breakout or Beirut Breakout. I can't pronounce that, but whatever. It was before Operation Desert Saber took place, in which the developer had realised where the game should take place. Desert Strike would take other influences from the video game Choplifter, which came out in 1982, and the main objective in that game was to rescue hostages while flying a helicopter, which is why there is a featured mechanic in Desert Strike that allows you to pick up MIAs in a similar manner. Desert Strike also had its claim to infamy in a few outlets upon its release, with sources citing that soldiers were seen burning copies of the game in protest, and that the game was made in bad taste in order to capitalise on the events that occurred at that time. But it wasn't all doom and gloom, as the game was mostly praised across each and every video game outlet that came out. Retro Gamer magazine listed it in their top 10 Mega Drive games list from 2014, calling it a thinking man's shoot 'em up. It was also EA's highest selling game at the time. Desert Strike was a game like no other. It took the shoot 'em up genre and made it its own. It spawned numerous follow-ups taking place in different environments and settings, such as the jungle, the city, and one time it even took its jab at the Soviet Union. There was even going to be a game set in the future entitled Future Strike, but it ended up being made into something else, which I'd be eager to go back and take a look at when I get the chance. In closing, Desert Strike was brilliant. Simply brilliant. One of the best Mega Drive games in existence. And I'd be lying to myself if I said it wasn't one of the hardest games I've played on the platform, but nevertheless, it has maintained legendary status among EA's library of classics. And that just about does it for this rather short episode of GB Reviews. But if you enjoyed it, you know what to do. And until next time, this has been Gamerboy talking to you on GB Gaming, where video games come first. Thanks once again, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.